Oasis. Practical Wisdom with Scott Allen.
Hello, I am Scott Allen, and thanks to my daughter Kate for developing the intro to the Practical Wisdom for Leaders podcast, where we offer a smart, fast-paced discussion on all things leadership. My guests help us explore timely topics and incorporate practical tips to help you make a difference in how you lead and live. If you haven't done so, please click subscribe so you automatically, seamlessly stay in the know when we publish new episodes. Likewise, please provide me with feedback. What do you like? What do you dislike? And what else would you like to know? And now, today's show. My guest today is Diogo Seixas, and we met because of the Collegiate Leadership Competition probably about 2 years ago. But I was just saying to Diogo that we didn't really have any time to sit down and build a relationship and connect. So we were emailing a few weeks back, and I thought this would be really, really fun to really get your perspective. You are an author, you're a speaker, you're starting a Ph.D. program, and yeah, I probably have stolen all of your thunder now, sir. But why don't you say a few things about yourself, and then we'll jump into our conversation today.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. First, it's just great to hear you saying my name, because I've been listening to your podcast for a while now. And, hearing you introducing me right now, it's pretty exciting. I can feel that I'm listening myself in your podcast. So thanks a lot for having me. A little bit about myself. So I am from Brazil originally. I came to the US for the first time in 2014 as an exchange student. I did 1 year here at Southern University, and then I had to go back and finish my degree in Brazil. But on that 1 year that I was here, I had a great experience in the leadership development program, and that really changed my life. I finished my undergrad in production engineering, but I changed my focus from engineering to leadership. So when I went back to Brazil, I started talking about leadership and more specifically about self-leadership, helping students. And then in 2017, I got back to the US to work on the same program that I graduated here at SIU. And that was my job for the past 3 years. And now I decided to challenge myself and go into the PhD program in business. So that's a very, very long story short about myself and how I ended up here.
Well, that is really, really cool. So I didn't realize that you were engineering to begin with. And the leadership development program at SIU really changed your trajectory. So what were some ingredients that kind of facilitated that? What do you think? That's pretty powerful.
It is. So when I first started college in 2011, my course was very new. I was the second cohort going through the whole program. Okay. So there wasn't that many opportunities outside classroom there. And then we end up, have you ever heard about ISAC? It's a student organization.
I haven't, no.
Okay, so ISAC, it's a world organization that develops leadership through exchange opportunities. So basically, it's a student organization that takes people from their countries to other countries, and also bring people from other countries, in my case, to Brazil, to do social work or sometimes even working companies. So it's that bridge between, NGOs, companies, and students. So we ended up starting a ISAC in my college. And, we were 5 friends. So who's going to do what? I ended up being the president. And of course, I sucked the whole year, right? I had no idea what leadership was. For me, honestly, it was more like a title than anything else. You are that figure that everybody looks up to.
Yep.
But I had no idea about what to do, besides motivate people.
Yeah.
And I think what triggered for me was when I came to SIU and I was part of the leadership development program, I saw that a lot of the things that I was learning in the program were mistakes that was things that I also learned, but based on my mistakes at ISAC in Brazil. So that was like the trigger, I was like, wow, you can really learn leadership. And if you do this right, you can create like change in wherever you go. And because I saw myself changing, my friends changing, I decided that that was something that I wanted to pursue. I knew that I wanted to help people. I didn't know how. When I learned about leadership, that became a passion, and I connected both things. Like I knew that I could help people, especially students, through leadership. And then I kind of like gave up engineering to pursue that path.
That's great. That's great. I have a similar experience in some ways. So I had never served in a leadership role until I joined a fraternity at the University of Minnesota. And I was kind of this shy, I was not all that confident. I had never led anything. And all of a sudden I got into this organization, and for 4 years I was heavily involved. But I didn't have a course. I had no knowledge of what great leaders do, nothing. And so it was hilarious, Diogo, because in my first job, my manager actually had a 7 a.m. book club, and we read The Leadership Challenge by Kouzes and Posner. And I sat there literally every day and just thought, well, I screwed that up. That was wrong. Well, you could have done that differently, Scott. And it was just transformative that this was even a topic that I could study or learn about. And I was hooked in, like, literally in that moment, because it was juxtaposed with this really powerful experience. This content I just found transformational, right? And it sounds like you had somewhat of a similar experience and an aha moment.
Oh yeah. And see, I love how life works, Scott, because the base for the leadership development program here is the leadership challenge. So
Yes.
my first contact with leadership was through the 5 practices of exemplary leaders.
Yep.
And that was the thing that, was like my wake up call to leadership.
Yep.
So it's nice to hear that, we came from the same origins, I guess, from leadership. That's super cool.
Well, and so when we originally talked about having this conversation, and we'll get to a couple different concepts, but as you look at even your home country of Brazil, how do you think about, basically, now that you've studied leadership here, kind of a U.S., most of the scholars, probably obviously Kouzes and Posner, and kind of a U.S. perspective of the topic, how do you think about leadership at home? Is it similar? Is it different? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that question.
Yeah. When we first talked about this, that was very interesting because I know that there are some things that are different, but I never saw that as something that would like stand out from each other.
Sure.
I think that generally, it's speaking, Brazilians are more people person. They're more like a relationship based. It's almost like to do business with Brazilians, like you do business with the person, not with the company. Like you have to build that relationship before you sell something. And I think that was like one of the biggest differences. Like we are way more people related, people person. I think that's the analogy, the language that we can use. So that's definitely the biggest difference. I have friends that know other Brazilians, and they always say like, "Wow, you guys are always like smiling. You guys seem like super happy all the time." And I had a fun story that I don't know if that's relevant or not, but when I was thinking about that was super funny. But I have a neighbor here, and every time I pass through his house, I say, "Hey, good morning. How you doing?" And Scott, no kidding, I think it took me probably like 2 months for him to say like, "Hey, good morning," like just say it back. So it was just awesome. Like I persisted, and I finally got to build that small relationship with my neighbor here. So that's probably like I think like the biggest difference, that I saw here.
Yep. Well, so heavily relationship based. Tell me about leadership when you went home for it was a couple years, I believe you said. What is the context like from a leadership education standpoint? Is it in every university like it is here in the United States? Is it less common? How does the kind of infrastructure work in Brazil?
Yeah. So the biggest difference also I see it's that I feel like there's more thinking not about educators, but about the students. I feel like students are more leadership oriented. Like the students in Brazil, they know the importance of learning leadership,
Hmm.
And the biggest proof of that is, so I told you about ISEC. When I think about other student organizations in Brazil, have you ever heard about the Junior Enterprise movement?
I have not.
Okay, so Junior Enterprise Movement is there are student organizations also that they basically do consultancy work to small companies, like the CEO program, right? Have
Yep.
you heard about that one too? Okay, cool. So it's basically the CEO program, but for college students. So I was like looking at the numbers also before I talk here. And the junior enterprise movement in Brazil today has over 22,000 students spread through Brazil.
Wow.
Those projects that they make that usually, it can go from a 5S project to maybe they have to build a mechanical part to a machine for a company,
Yep.
So it's a big range of projects from different majors, from engineering to business to geography, history. There's like a very broad range. But I was looking at their numbers, and from 2016 to 2018, they made over $15 million.
Wow.
So this is just like amazing because it's a self-organized organization
Yep.
by students. And then Junior Enterprise Movement, it's a big one there. ISEC also today has probably, I saw the numbers here, but like thousands and thousands of students. Then we have the Engineer Without Borders, which was an organization that I worked also with them. And what impresses me is that their organization level. They have universities, and then each university has a state organization that takes care of them.
Yep.
And then there's also another organization in the federal level that organizes all of them.
Okay.
And all the federations also meet once a year to talk about the ward project. So for me, it's just like amazing to see how those student organizations organize themselves to help Brazil improve and to develop themselves in becoming better leaders. And then when I came to the US, that was something that I didn't see in a big proportion like that. I feel like here it's more STEM related, right? Like the people are more hands-on. We build a robot, we build a car, and that's how they end up practicing leadership. But I think like those are like the big two differences. But again, your question was about like how the as a leadership educator, how those two things are different. And I think like in Brazil, the students give more value to learn leadership than here.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So do you mean that just to clarify that the students really value being engaged, being involved, being active and doing, right? And that's the primary model or vehicle for learning leadership. It seems to me at times here, leadership education can be a little more passive, even a little bit at the collegiate level where we're sitting in a room and we're kind of learning about leadership. Now, of course, that's not a hard and fast rule, but is that what you mean?
Yes, it is. Even so, for example, another thing that was big in Brazil and that I missed so much here is the amount of conferences that we had there. And I don't know if it's because it was my environment. I
Yeah.
used to be a speaker back there, and here I ended up working with a small group in one university. But and the semester before coming here, I spoke in probably more than like 20 different conferences, all organized by students. And all those conferences, they had some leadership there. Sometimes was engineering, sometimes was business, sometimes was, biotech, like whatever it was, but they're always talking about leadership.
Wow.
So
And it's the students that are organizing, right?
Students organizing, yes.
That's a big difference. I mean, that really is a big difference because at least my impression of the US is that there's always an adult who's either an advisor or someone who's administering the student programming. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. That's a great point. And I think that's what I was trying to say about, the need for leadership comes from them. Like they know how important that is.
That's really cool. Well, so tell me about your experience, because you served as a coach for the Collegiate Leadership Competition. And that's, for our listeners, that's an organization where we have students who the universities kind of sign on. You get a coach, the university assigns a coach, and then there's teams of 6 students. And those 6 students practice leadership for 3 or 4 months. And then after that practice season is done, there's a competition. And so you served as a coach for 2 years, I believe, or was it 3?
Yes.
I think
it was 3, because then the third year was the pandemic, so it ended up not happening. But it was 3 years, yes.
So share just a couple observations of that experience. What stood out for you from CLC?
Oh my God, Scott. Honestly, I remember telling Bella that the first time I saw the curriculum, I was like, acronyms, like how can you learn leadership from acronyms? And Scott and whoever's listening, I couldn't be more wrong, because it was great to see throughout the years or students like going back to the acronyms to, either have a confrontation or either, talk about like a leadership style or a follower style, and because we all knew what that meant, it made so much sense, we were all on the same pattern, we're all with the same knowledge. I can't tell how many times the confront model, for example, helped me, and how many times when I had students coming to me saying, hey, like I'm having a problem with this friend or this professor, what should I do? I was always like, okay, sit here. We're gonna talk about like how to confront people.
Yeah.
And I would always guide them through those steps. A big one for me also, I don't know if I can say all those things, like the solve model was a huge one, when I think about like, oh my God, we have a problem, what we're gonna do, usually we just like step into the solution, right? We don't make sure that everybody understood the problem. Very often we don't even know who's going to be the leader of that activity, right? So that's probably the 2 that I use the most. It's so funny because it's for everything. If we had our students and we needed to decide what we're going to eat, it's always like, okay, let's use the solve model, okay, who's going to be the leader, who's going to look online, it's such a great experience. And honestly, I think I remember you saying, Scott, when we first met in 2018, was probably because it was a spring, so 2018. I remember you saying that the competition was our excuse to practice leadership.
Yes.
And it's amazing to see how much effort you guys put on that. When I first saw the activities from the competition and even like from the curriculum, I was so impressed about how many like details are there and how structured everything is. And then talking with Bella once, I was like, Bella, like where do you guys get all those things? And she said like, oh, we created.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it was possible to create something like that.
Yeah.
So the collegiate leadership competition definitely blew my mind about not only curriculum and how simple you guys make that appear,
Yep.
but also like practicing that and all the tension and the excitement from the competition. So it was an amazing experience as a coach and as a participant also.
Well, and it's a roller coaster, right? I mean,
Oh,
and for those who are listening, Bella, Diogo is she was the executive director, incredible woman, just built this organization to what it's become, and absolutely just an incredible person. And so we are so thankful for all that she did to help build the CLC. That's for sure. And so now you've moved out of your previous role at SIU, and you're taking on the PhD. I love it. I love it. And well,
yes.
and you also authored a book. It was kind of funny. You wrote me and said, "Oh, I decided to write a book this summer." So I want to hear about that. But tell me about the PhD program. What are you thinking about? What is the focus that do you have any sense of what's to come? It's exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is. That was a big decision for me, Scott, because I know that this was like a big decision for me because when I was in Brazil and I started, as a speaker and talking about leadership, my role was outside the classroom.
Mm,
I would touch people outside the classroom and help them, to become a better person, a better student, a better leader. And when I came to SIU, uh, it was a student organization. So it wasn't like it was and it wasn't inside the classroom. So
yes.
I had my role as a teacher, as a professor, as a coach over there. But I always taught myself, there's a lot of people trying to change the educational system or whatever, like from outside, right? And that is very effective. But I also know that we can serve as examples for other people inside the classroom as well. So
Yeah.
I think that was like my biggest motivator, it's to become a example for people and for other people that are always saying, oh, we need to change the educational system and blah blah blah. So let's do it from inside the classroom.
Yep.
And it's amazing to see, Scott, like what you do. Like I'm always listening to your podcast. I heard that one from the Leadership Educators podcast, and how like you were adapting to everything. And there's like a bunch of like many more great examples out there that are really like doing a great job in developing students and leaders inside the classroom.
Yep.
So that was my main goal. That's what I want to do. In terms of research, I know that I want to do something related to new generations, so millennials and students and Gen Z, Gen X. And I want to work with either values-based theory or goal-setting theory, something that gives students like more a direction of where to go. It's funny that I am like trying to explain all this to you. There's like so many other things coming to my mind because there was like a huge path that led me to come to this conclusion.
Yeah.
And it was also one of the reasons why I wrote the book.
Yeah.
It doesn't have much to do about the PhD program, but this thing about like changing and helping people, of course.
Yeah. Well, you'll be an incredible educator. You'll do an awesome job.
Thank you.
You have passion for the work, and that's what I love about my job, is that, and job isn't even the right word. It's not, when I go to the classroom, it's not like I'm going to work. That just doesn't sound right. It's like this silly thing that I have, kind of a racket I'm running, that I get paid to interact with wonderful young people who are looking kind of up at their career and trying to figure out what they want to lock into and do. And if I can be a small part of that, that's that's not work. That's fun.
Yeah.
It's there's another word for it other than work. And you have that energy and that passion as well, and you'll change lives. I mean, you really will.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know something that really stuck with me. Uh, I was listening to one of your podcasts with his name was, I made a note here, David Bosch. I think he was like your advisor or something.
So Dave Rush was the first guest. John Wergen. It was John Wergen who was my dissertation chair, and we were talking about building relationships and community in the classroom. Yeah. Great man.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, but it was David that he said something about like how well are we doing this when you guys were talking about how well we are developing leadership. And I remember that I was like running outside, and I remember after I heard that I basically like black out, because that was always in my mind, like that got stuck in my mind. And I think that's something I'm always going to take from here. It's not just like going to the classroom and teaching our content, but we're like, how well are you doing this, right? Like how are you making sure that people are being developed and becoming better leaders and better students, that they're learning everything that is there. So just for whoever's listening, if you want to go back, and I think it's episode 2 or 3.
No, it's
David.
episode 1. It's episode 1. It's Dave Rush, and he said, I have a fear. He said, I have a fear that what we're doing isn't making a difference. And I started the series with that quote. I have a fear, because I have that same fear sometimes. And I think this whole leader development, an episode just dropped today with David Day, who's probably the most prolific scholar on leadership development and leader development. And it was just such a joy to have a conversation with him. He wrote a seminal piece in 2000. And so we're almost 20 years. Well, yeah, we are 20 years later. And we had this really cool conversation about what he's learned and how he's thinking about leader and leadership development. But what I love about this topic, Diogo, is that it's like Mount Everest. And I think we're maybe at base camp, but I have so much fuel for the fact that it's such a beautiful puzzle. And how do we ensure that we're doing it well? How do we truly ensure that these millions of dollars are being spent well, that our students' time is being spent well, and that we're truly making a difference, right?
Yep.
Beautiful puzzle, challenging puzzle.
It is.
Because there's so many different dimensions.
Definitely. And, it's funny because that and then from that came another quote from Ken Robinson, the guy from, what's
TED.
his book?
Ken Robinson, didn't he have the most watched TED Talk of all time? It was about learning or...
Yes, his TED Talk's called like How Schools Kill Creativity or something like that.
Yep.
But he was talking about, like, he was telling this case where he went to a conference and a student came to him and said, "Oh, I have, this very boring professor, and he doesn't help me at all. What should I do?" And then he turned that question to the student, like, what can you do? Because it's easy to just sit there and be passive about this whole thing and doing nothing. But it comes from you also to find your passion inside the classroom, So that to say that the transformation has to come from both sides, Me as a student now, I'm always like, trying to cooperate with the professor and participate and find ways to be more engaging, because hopefully I can engage like my classroom also in the whole process and then helping the professor. So it's never just the professor's fault. It's not the work. It doesn't come only from the professor. It has to come from the student also. We all need to take ownership from, having a better classroom. So it's great to see that.
Yeah. Well, and if you have a professor that creates the right environment, and I'm always trying for this. I don't always achieve it. It's a goal, but how do you create an environment where then, yes, we can co-create, we can riff off one another. Tony Middlebrooks, he had a saying, and it really stood out to me. It was, I don't know better, I know different. And so if all of us can kind of come into this space and share what we know and how we see the world and our perspective on the world. Of course, I know some things different than you, and maybe some more about certain topics, but you also know certain topics that I have no sense of, right? In this conversation, I know very little about engineering. I wish I knew about engineering, but when Pythagorean was introduced in about 8th grade, when that theorem came up on the board and numbers became letters, there was a little guy upstairs that kind of shut down. And I did not have a growth mindset. So it was pretty fixed then from there on.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, I think it's about co-creating that space and creating an environment where it's not just dependent on that one person. I couldn't agree more. More.
And
Well,
you said something very good also, Scott, because it's collaboration, and myself, I am guilty about that I haven't been more involved with the leadership community. I'm definitely gonna start doing this more, coming in the PhD program, but it's learning from each other, right? Like I always tell people that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Someone else already did that. You can use that and do a little bit better.
Yep.
Right. And then you can build yourself your own environment. So I think, like, for whoever's listening, like, don't forget to, ask for help. Yeah. We always talked about this in the leadership development program. You don't need to do it by yourself. Ask for help because people have done that already, and you can learn from them and do even better.
Yep. And add to the body. David Day said he's really excited because there's a growing community of scholars, younger scholars, who are helping to work that puzzle of leader development, leadership education. And I'm so excited for you. I was so fortunate when I entered my PhD program. I tapped into an energy source that was so full. It was a joy to sit around on a Saturday afternoon and read and learn, because what I was reading and what I was learning, I had so much fuel for. And I'm actually writing a paper right now. And some of these books that I purchased at the time, so this is 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004. I literally this afternoon was opening some of those books because I needed to revisit some of the content, and it was all marked up and there were Post-it notes that were all ratty, and it was just an awesome memory because I was so thankful for that learning experience. And so I'm excited for you. We should do an annual check-in about your process through this process, right? We should do that and just, kind of check in. Because for anyone who's listening, who's thinking about a PhD program, or who has thought about kind of furthering their education, at least for me, I felt very fortunate because I tapped into a topic and an energy source that it's fueled me for 20 years. It really has. And you're about to begin, not begin, but it's a new chapter in that educational journey. That's very exciting. And so you started practicing this summer by writing. So tell me a little bit about what you wrote this summer.
Oh yeah. So so that's when this story gets complicated about everything, Scott. It's so funny because I feel like my life goes back and forth, like so much. Another reason why I joined the PhD program is because since I learned the power of leadership, I knew that I had to be smart. I knew that I had to be an example for people. So I ended up started reading a bunch of books, right? So I was like, I'm done with one. I start another one. Sometimes I read 2, 3, 4 books about, leadership, self-development, self-help, a bunch of things. So when I was in Brazil, probably at the beginning of our company there. We founded our company in 2016, January 2016.
Okay.
And I was listening to a podcast, and that podcast was from a CEO from a talent hunting company.
Okay.
And by the time, Brazil was kind of having this crisis. It was hard to find jobs. And the host asked her, like, Sophia, so is it true that it's being hard to place people in companies right now? And she said, like, yes, it's been hard, but not because we don't have many spots, many jobs available, but because the students cannot answer one simple question.
Huh.
And that question was, what is your dream? And at that point, I was like, man, like it doesn't make sense, because myself was always like a big dreamer. I always had like thousands of imaginary friends, I always, it's kind of funny, but I was like, how can people...
Diego, do you still have imaginary friends? That's the big question.
So I don't have, they are partially imaginary and partially real, because I talk with like my, stuffed animals here. So that might be imaginary. I don't know.
We'll just let that one be there.
Yeah. We can cut this. Just kidding. We don't need to. But so that's like fun fact.
Yeah.
I saw once about ways to reflect. Yeah. And one of there's like many ways that you can reflect about life. So you can talk to people, you can write it down, you can talk to yourself. But another thing is when you impersonate things.
Yeah. So
that's when I was like, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm just like impersonating objects so I can reflect about my life. So
it's just creativity is all that is. Yeah. I love it.
That's it. When I saw that question, I couldn't imagine like people not having dreams, like they don't know what to do with their lives, basically. And I was someone that was always like trying those theories in my speeches as well. So as much as I was getting to know people, I was asking them, like, hey, what's your dream? And then I heard so many cool things, like I want to be a professor to change the educational system. I want to be a politician to also change the system. I want to be a doctor to cure cancer. But most people didn't have a dream, or they had the dream of being rich, right? Yeah. I want to be rich. I want to be successful, which is great. But when you get to that point, what then? What's after?
Yeah.
So that I was on that journey for probably a year when I got the invitation to come to the US and work with the leadership development program. And then when I got here, I asked my students the same question, what's your dream? Do you know what you want to do with your life? And same thing, everybody was lost.
Wow.
And I was like, man, like that's my call to action, like 2 different countries, 2 different realities, 2 different economies, same problems. So I have to do something about it, because I was only talking about it. I was only telling people, hey, this is the why you should have a dream. But I never taught them how to have a dream.
Yeah.
So in 2017, I created something called the Dream Lab. So the Dream Lab was a 10-week class where it was like 10 sessions where I would guide people through this self-development thing. We would talk about things that they like, passions, values, desires, and goals and emotions, and all kinds of things to kind of help them to figure themselves so they could make more conscious decisions about what they want. Because so far, they're just like doing things that people told them, their parents, school, and, the environment, media, whatever. Yep. So I did the Dream Lab for 2 years. I had 2 different groups going through, creating a class. I think that's what you professors call creating a syllabus, creating a class, designing a class.
Yeah, well, I love that design, right? Yes, it's design.
And a lot of things changed. And after those 2 years, now that I had those 2 months, I had this 2-month period from my old job in the PhD program. I had nothing to do. I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down and write this thing. So I can, achieve. I can reach more people outside my environment here. So I wrote that. I sent to the editor this week. So actually yesterday, and now is in editing phase, and I got to think about the name and all those small things, which it's harder than I thought it would be, honestly.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I worked on a book this summer as well with a co-author. And yes, I mean, I think the hard part comes when now you're either shopping for publishers or marketing, right? I mean, but that's awesome that you got out of your head all of that content so that you're at the phase you're in right now, right? And if I heard you earlier correctly, I mean, this project sounds a little bit close to what you potentially want to study, motivation, values. So that's incredible, because you might begin adding to that whole body and base of literature so that people can tap into. I did a podcast. I'd love for you to listen to this podcast, Diogo. It's Sarah Safari. And that's a really cool story, but it's a story about a woman who I don't know how old she would have been. Maybe it was her late 20s, but she locked in at that moment and did she's doing incredible work. So listen to that podcast, because it's just a really interesting case study of someone who clicks in and just goes. And it's sad. I think I was probably 32 when I clicked the first time I taught a class, and I was in the classroom, and that's where I had that moment of, well, this isn't work. Geez, they're going to pay me to be here right now. Okay. And it just clicked. And I think, again, I was like 30 or 31, but I think having that as a objective, or having that as a vision, or I don't want to set people up to never find what they hope to, but I also think there needs to be some level of intentionality about paying attention to where your energy is, to, like you said, what you value. And if you pay attention to all of that and you have some level of clarity, maybe some of the time when some opportunities present themselves, you'd be more likely to see them, right?
Yeah, that's it. I think the thing that I most talk about in the book is to take things from the unconscious mind and bring to your own consciousness.
Yeah.
To the point where I think we as a generation, we want things to get done as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Like we just want like things to happen fast. And because of that, sometimes we jump steps of that process of self-development.
Yep.
And then think like if you're making any product and you jump part of the process, at the end, you're going to have a defective process, a defective product, right?
Yep.
So it's the same thing about life. Like we need to understand that this is a process that sometimes it takes longer,
Yep.
sometimes it takes shorter.
Yep.
But if we can be more conscious about that, at
Yep.
the point, I always say, like, when you get things done, you're looking down and just like, doing. The key to this whole process is to stop, look up, evaluate the direction you want to go, and then keep moving forward.
Yep.
So that's my main goal with this book. I want people to stop, to evaluate what's happening now, and make a conscious decision of what comes next.
Yeah.
Is it going to work? I don't know.
Yeah.
Honestly, like we don't know if our choices are going to be the right choices,
Yeah.
but we can always take the best with the choices we make. Right.
Exactly. And at least then there's some hope of some intentionality behind it. It was really cool. The other day I was with my daughters, and somehow this came up. It was they'd heard something somewhere about creating a list of things you want to do in life. And so I said to them, well, I have a list, and I hadn't looked at it in probably 7 or 8 years, but I probably wrote this in 2005, 2004. And it was 50 things to accomplish in life. And, some of them had been accomplished now. So they watched me strike it through. And some things were maybe a little less relevant. And some things I heard it and I was like, because one of them was have a coffee or a beer with a mountain climber in France. Just, I want to sit and have coffee with a mountain climber and just talk, or a beer. And I haven't done that yet, but it refreshed that's a life experience I want to have. And there's a whole bunch of other things, large and small, on that list, but at least there's some level of intentionality then behind where we're orienting ourselves. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
Where the list was, like, did you type it in? Was it in your computer?
It was in my computer, and it used to be that I would go to it a little more often than I had, because like I said, I haven't looked at it in probably 5 or 6 years. I knew and I remembered that I had it, and I had accomplished some of the things on the list, but it checked me back into some things I'd love to do. So I'm excited to hear how all of this plays out for you. And
I
yeah.
asked. I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I asked, like, where did you put that in? Because one of, like, the first chapter of the book, I talk about journaling and how important it is, like, to really write things down, right? And like I started this probably like 4 years ago, and it's just like great because every time I start a new journal, I can always like look again to my list of things to do. So the Dream Lab, for example, it started as a note in a random page in one of my journals.
Yep.
And I have a picture somewhere of that at the note, but it was just saying, like, test your theories with your students in the leadership development program. And that one note, probably because of the intentionality or more conscious thinking I put on that, that one note became a book, 2-3 years later. But that's how everything started. That's what I mean about being more conscious about the things that you want to do. And having a journal, it's a great way to always remind yourself about those things.
Yeah. There's too many fun things to accomplish in life, and having a place like a journal, for me it was a document just on a computer, but having that, again, I think it can serve as a little bit of a true north and a compass for what we want to orient ourselves toward. And so you're coming back in a year, and we can talk about the world in 2021. I want to, if it's okay with you, I'd love to follow you through this process of going through your PhD and hearing about your adventures, of the book. And I think that would be a lot of fun if you're open to it.
Oh, definitely. I'm going to put on my calendar as soon as we are done with this.
Okay.
Beautiful.
I always close out this podcast by saying, what are you streaming? What are you watching? What are you listening to? What stands out for you, Diogo, that's kind of got your mind turning lately?
So my mind turning lately. So I thought about that question before we came here. And first, I never stopped streaming Friends. That's something that's how I learned English. I know the whole thing, lines and like, it's so funny because every time I watch with someone, they're like, dude, can you stop repeating the lines, So I am that kind of person. And honestly, I think that Friends teach you a lot about life in general, you know? So anyway, great show. But right now, I was watching a lot of This Is Us. Have you watched that?
I have, yeah.
I started watching This Is Us, and it's a great show that shows a lot about life, a lot of drama also. I'm a crier, so there isn't one episode that I don't cry on that thing. I even had to step back a little bit because I was getting too emotional, I guess. But it's a great show. And then Suits is another one that it was great, and I really recommend to people. Podcast speaking, I've been listening a lot of the leadership educators. I've been listening a lot to yours also, Scott. If I'm not wrong, I watched from episode 1 to 3, and then from 9 to 16.
Okay.
That's so I just haven't watched like from 4 to 8 or 4 to 9 there. So
well, Dan and Lauren do a wonderful job on their podcast. That's for sure.
They definitely do.
Yep.
Yeah. And just general. I love NPR, Life Kit. I think that's a great podcast that you learn a bunch of things there. I love learning from life and with life. So they always have like such random things, but it's very, very helpful.
I love it. I love it. Well, Diogo, we will see each other a year from now for sure. I hope to see you before then. But thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. Best of luck as you start the PhD. Best of luck as you tap into what it is that you have a passion for. I hope everything with the book comes along beautifully. I look forward to seeing that. And be well, my friend. Be well. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for the opportunity. I really enjoyed talking to you finally, talking and getting to know each other in a live environment. So it was very nice for me also. Thanks a lot again.
Oh, well, take care. Be well. What a really fun conversation with Diogo. Here's a gentleman with so much potential. He's dreaming big. He's living what it is he teaches. And I'm going to put it in the show notes, but he just sent me a link to his new website, Ride Academy. And RIDE stands for Reflect, Imagine, Decide, Evolve. Stop and reflect about who you are and where you want to be. Dream and strategize about the numerous possibilities. Decide, make a decision about what your next move is and go for it. And evolve, learn and grow from the outcome, no matter what it is. Diogo, thank you for the work that you do. And again, can't wait to meet with you a year from now to hear about your adventures. Now, just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so, the ILA Global Conference is coming up. I will put some registration information in the show notes so you can check out and learn more there, but hope to see you online at that conference. Take care, everybody. Be well. Bye-bye.